Okay, well, what can we say? What a fantastic presentation from our patron. What the day can only get can it get any better? Well, we shall soon see. No pressure then for our next presentation, which is the Veterans Commissioner, Charlie Wallace. Well, what is the Veterans Commissioner going to be talking to us about today, you might say? Well, as some of you might know, I'm an ex-veteran myself, and it's a very important part of my life of helping our veterans to re-socialize, to get back into community once they leave their service. So who better but to go to Scotland's very own veteran commissioner and ask these questions of him, which I did previously. So let's have a listen to what he's got to say.
I think there's a really good story about the Scottish Men's Sheds as an organisation, which appeals to me in my role as the Veterans Commissioner. So really, what is the Veterans Commissioner? I think one of the first points to point out is that the Scottish Veterans Commissioner is an advocate rather than a champion of veterans. So my role is very much quite often behind the scenes. I'm there to try and make sure that the Scottish Government, across the piece, and whichever part of government you might be in, when they're developing policy, they're thinking about veterans and the effect their policy might have on this group of people who have served their country. So much of my work it's not up there in lights at the front of the house. I'm the guy who's running around making sure the lights are on, spotlighted on veterans who are on the stage doing what they do so well. So that's really what I'm about. And my key to success is when I see policies that have been constructed in the Health Directorate or the Education Directorate or any other part of the Scottish Government has something in there that absolutely recognises veterans for what they are and what they can contribute to our society. So hopefully that makes it a bit clearer. So I'm not there at the front of house screaming and shouting from the rafters about veterans. I'm afraid I do that because I feel compelled to do that. But that's where I'm at the greatest effect. My stuff is behind the scenes, talking to all the bureaucrats who work in the Scottish Government, and of course, most importantly, the ministers who are running the decision makers in the government.
Yeah, because before I got involved with this, why would I know that your role even exists? You're right, and putting that out to the veterans and through the shedders, etc., or veterans who will hopefully become shedders, and do that transition back into Civvy Street. My hope is that by having this piece is that it's going to generate this awareness that actually there is someone championing them, even though it's not a champion in that terminology, that this is what's going on and they have a voice behind the scenes, which is really important, particularly if you're feeling isolated or not heard.
And that's exactly part of the remit of what I'm looking at. And it is about the reintegration of our military community back into the society from where they came. So we must always remember that a veteran started life as a school kid in a local school, or even before then, of course, in their pram. But when they got to school, they were there with all their contemporaries, and they just decided that they would go and join the military. And so they've gone into the military and they've learned skills and they've been given opportunities that many others may not have had. And they've been presented a series of challenges that many others may not have had. So when they come back into their community, it's the same place that they really left. But the difference being, of course, is their experiences that they've had in the military. For the most of them, of course, they get in there and back into the communities, and they are able to use the skills and those experiences to the mutual benefit of themselves and the people that they're working with in Civvy Street. But for some, of course, those experiences can be overwhelming. And it's about creating the opportunity to have somewhere for these people to go when those experiences are overwhelming, who will understand exactly who they are and what they're about. And of course, I think this is one of the great things about the Scottish Men's Sheds Association, is it creates an environment that in the first instance, for them as men, they've got somebody else who is a man to talk to. But secondly then, they've also got somebody to talk to who may speak the same language as them, as far as being a veteran is concerned. But one of the things that excites me about the Scottish Men's Sheds is it introduces veterans to those who are not military, but yet still have a need. So they recognise it's not just because perhaps they are a veteran, they've got a challenge. Actually, in all walks of life, men can face challenges which are only best looked at amongst their own.
we're up against the national press in a way where men's sheds have been put out there that these are for older retired men, and it's a workshop. And I think, like I said to you when we met last, what we're trying to generate is this is for men over the age of 18 from all walks of life. And so we want to get this intergenerational, and we look at the suicide rate in Scotland, which is the highest in Europe, is a 30 to 45-year-old age group. This is on the increase, and with COVID and guys losing their jobs, guys coming out of the forces, how do we access these guys to tell them that sheds are there? They might never even heard about them coming back from Afghanistan. These didn't exist when we left. How can we connect with these guys and let them know that they actually are out there and that they're young enough to get in there? This is a challenge I'm having.
Well, it's interesting. One of the what I'm up to at the moment is writing a series of reports about the challenge of transition from the services into Civvy Street.
Okay.
I've written 2 of them so far. One is about employability and skills and learning. The second one has been about housing, and I'm now just launching my third and final one, which is about health and well-being. And so I'm concentrating on that period of transition from when you consider leaving the services to actually leaving, coming into Civvy Street, and how you're immersed back into Civvy Street. So what I'm picking up in this series of reports that I've been running for, I've been writing these for now over a year. And okay, admittedly, it's been during lockdown, which has been hugely frustrating because I haven't been able to face-to-face with as many people as I. But one of the things that I'm picking up is that there is an absolute requirement to set the right conditions for people when they leave. Bearing in mind the average age of a male service leaver is only in their 20s, mid-20s.
Really?
So,
okay.
So we're getting around about 1,400 people leaving the services each year and coming to Scotland. And the average age of that lot, bear in mind the majority of them are in the army and they tend to leave slightly younger than the other 2 services, is in their mid-20s, late 20s. So that's quite compelling when you consider the challenge that those individuals are going to have. Because of course it won't be just about their mental health or maybe even their physical health if they've been injured in the course of their service physically, but it will be also about seeking employment. It's about translating the skills they've learned in the military into a language that can be understood by a future employer. It's about understanding how the housing policies work so they can get themselves a house if they're going to have to go into the social housing ladder to get themselves into the right space. It's about understanding all of that. So unless you set the conditions correctly, then you're going to find that these individuals will be exposed and they won't get that job, which they probably absolutely could do standing on their heads. Therefore, they become disillusioned and therefore they become a statistic, which is not helpful. Now, what we've got to do is, so we've got to get those conditions right. We've got to look at this from a positive perspective, but at the same time, we've got to tell them that there is a net there that's going to support them if things don't work out. And part of that net, I see, is the Scottish Men's Sheds Association, which can be there to hold people together. But of course, it's not all about negativity. This is, I think, is about positivity. One of the things I like about the men's sheds is it is about creating positivity. It's about giving people strength. It's about giving them some hope and understanding to give them the courage to crack on and conduct their lives out with the times when they're with their mates in a shed.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, it's just try and get them through the doors or give them the awareness around it and get away from this concept that this is for old blokes who've got nothing better to do with their lives, go and play dominoes. Absolutely nonsense, but we're up against that in a way. For me, having those youngsters coming in, one would bring in fresh blood. I've never seen older men become more perky than when they're around younger men, which is fantastic to see, and vice versa, actually, and how they work really well together in respect for both the age groups, but in a calm, relaxed environment like a shed rather than having orders shouted at them, etc., etc. So for me, those youngsters, I think, as you've said, it's about keeping their morale up rather than getting depressed and sitting at home in your bedsit going, oh my God, I'm overwhelmed. they're going to go there, they can have those conversations with younger and older men, and they're in the soup together, let's say. Or those older guys have already been there in their younger years, and they can mentor them and keep their morale and mental health up to keep applying for the jobs, etc., rather than hitting the pub or sitting at home and being on a PlayStation and living in La La Land.
Yes, I think that's right, and I would add to that this is about communications. It's about information sharing. And it does tell me, and it's one of those strongest things that I've picked up in my nearly 3 years as a commissioner, is about collaboration between organisations such as yours that have a desire to help, who are there absolutely to put an arm around somebody. And you all do it for different reasons and for different purposes, etc. But actually, collectively, you are that safety net. Whatever the challenge might be, I often find myself saying, whatever the challenge might be for a service leaver, young service leaver, there is somebody in Scotland who'll be there who's prepared to help. It's just, can we connect that one person who can help that individual? And that's, I think, what you're talking about. And the way to do that, I think, is consortia like the Unforgotten Forces consortium. It's about arranging it with a group of like-minded individuals who do different things, but can pass information between each other to help that individual not fall through the net and not understand that actually something like the sheds would be a perfect place for them to go and just be themselves and relax and gain the confidence that you wish to give them. So I would like to see in the future, we have the Unforgotten Forces consortium that tends to look at the old team. Are we now in the right position to start considering some sort of consortia that will look at charities that have a focus on the younger veterans and potentially their families, don't forget. So it's not just about the veteran himself. They normally come attached with something. How can we help them as well? Because in helping the wider network of that individual, we're probably helping that individual as well, potentially. So
yes. Yeah, and so that's what I'm trying to do, is we're trying to find who those levels are and then educate them about us, etc., etc.
So what I'm going to be finding myself recommending, and I'm pretty certain I'm going to be making a recommendation in my next report on health and well-being, is if we can have a consortium that considers the older veteran, where is our consortium of organisations that looks at the younger veteran?
Yeah, 100%. I'd be up for that, yeah.
You're going to find that when my report publishes in January, February next year, it may well have that sort of recommendation, and I will be pointing the Scottish Government towards helping the statutory services, who are part of this consortium, don't forget, along with the charities and other organisations who can support, are looking at that particular cohort of people. And I think there will be an opportunity for the Scottish Men's Stage Association to get engaged with that when the Scottish Government enacts. I hope it will accept my recommendation, clearly. Assuming it does, then I think it will get the ball rolling.
Yeah, that would be very exciting, because what we're seeing, as I said, is that we're looking at the guys who have stepped up over the last 6 to 7 years, are now well into their 70s, and they're definitely suffering fatigue. And they're looking for younger guys to come up and take over these roles of leadership in the shed, so they can actually step down and just relax and be in the shed. And it's a fantastic opportunity for these youngsters to come in and be mentored maybe for a year or 6 months to step into these positions of charitable leadership and trusteeship of a shed, particularly about stepping back into responsibility and learning in management style stuff, but in a more of a relaxed way to further their careers back into Civvy Street.
I think that is, there's nothing but short of outstanding logic in what you've just said. And I think the challenge, it is a challenge, I think, across society, I think at the moment, about the business of getting people to volunteer. And that you mentioned the challenges that you've had in opening up your sheds, making sure they're COVID compliant, and all the challenges, the rules and regulations and guidance and the conflicting guidance puts an enormous amount of weight on individuals who do volunteer for these sorts of things. And I think annoyingly, it scares a few people away. And I think what is great about the Scottish Men's Sheds Association, in my view, is actually that you're making it as relaxed as it possibly can be within those guidances, and not putting too much pressure on inviting those individuals to come in and take on some of the responsibility. It's a difficult one, though, and it's a challenge that is faced by everybody.
So what do you think that these guys could bring to the sheds? What skills do you think the sheds would benefit from recruiting them?
I think I'll sort of answer this in a slightly roundabout way. I think the first thing, and it's a bit of a selfish one really, is the amount of benefit that a veteran might get in being part of a shed. Because it's not just about speaking to their own, as in other veterans. It's about being opened up to opportunities and things that other people do, and who come from other walks of life and have faced other sort of challenges in their worlds that bring them to somewhere like the shed, and realizing that their particular world is not unique. Others are suffering for other reasons, and between them, when they get together, they realize that actually it's not just because you're a veteran. It just happens to be something that a lot of people suffer sometimes. And then coming to a place like a shed gives you the confidence to understand that broader perspective that I think makes it easier for an individual, a veteran, to come back into their community writ large when they come back. There's a danger perhaps that if you put a veteran, there may be a temptation rather to pull veterans together because they understand each other, they speak the same language, and they understand what you know, all the black humor that goes on in the military, and they understand about friendship and comradeship under strain and stress, etc. And that is laudable, but at the same time, in itself, we need to try and branch out on that. And this is where I think the sheds really do throw up an opportunity by introducing them to people who haven't been in the military, but yet still suffer and have challenges which they're trying to overcome as well. And I think those veterans will discover that they've got something to offer those individuals as much as those individuals have to offer those veterans. And that mutually beneficial activity, I think, is really, really useful in my opinion. So I think that's how I think that veterans can thrive in a men's sheds environment, and how I think that the men's sheds can gain advantage by having some of these characters as part of their organisations.
Yeah, there definitely are characters. I don't know whether you remember listening to the podcast we did with Unforgotten Forces, and there's some of those guys on there, and they were sort of, I remember them saying, you know, where else can you get the banter, like the black humor in a way, or non-PC humor like we have in the forces to get us through tough times. But we've actually found a very similar closest thing in the shed. What was your take on listening to that with those guys and what we're trying to do?
Well, I think it actually articulated far better than me about the benefits of being the shed, and describing what I was trying to say there. That it created that environment where they felt they could say what they wanted to say amongst a bunch of men who would understand what they were going to be saying, and the added benefit of some of those men not being in the military, who may have a slightly different slant on life, but nonetheless still need that environment in which to be able to express themselves. So I sense one of mutual benefit, and really critically for me, I think it helped, from what I listened to, it helped break some of them away from just a military-only world and realizing there's more out there and they can be part of that. And that's, I think, to them, their personal benefit, and I think it's a benefit to the community writ large.
Have you become a member of your local shed? I hear they're about to put you to pasture, mate. What's your plans?
I have to confess that I am a group with a group of men, but it's not in a shed. It's in a bit of ground outside Dunblane, where we do a bit of forestry work together. And the main reason we get together is because we just want to talk men rubbish and stuff that girls don't understand, or we want to be brave, braver than we might have been if we were in front of the girls. And so just talking about ourselves. So there's a group of 9 of us that gather on a fairly regular basis to look after a bit of ground. It's just a bit of land, it's a bit of forestry work. So we fell timber, we chop it up, we cut our own firewood, we just manage a bit of woodland, really. It's our bit for a whole purpose of trying to improve the sort of green credentials for our own sort of peace of mind. But more importantly, though, it is about a bunch of blokes getting together, interestingly, a bit of physical labour. So no, I'm afraid I have to confess I'm not a member of my local shed, but that doesn't stop me wanting to go and visit sheds in my role as the commissioner, and whereupon I can then take the story of the men's sheds back into the Scottish Government and point them in the right direction to make sure that they're not forgotten.
Okay, so are you open for visiting now? The sheds are opening up again. I was down in
I'm more than happy.
You happy to do some traveling? What's your closest to you that's easiest?
It's somewhere near Stirling. Is easy, but anywhere across Scotland is fine.
Doable.
It's doable. It must be. I'm the Scottish Veterans Commissioner. I'm not the Edinburgh Veterans Commissioner or the Veterans Commissioner. So I'm happy to go anywhere, really. Okay,
great. We'll try and set something up like that.
Say again.
We'll try and set something up. That'll be great.
Yeah, I think that would be that'd be good. I mean, I'd love to just to hear some of the stories, pick up some of the vibes, and give me the reassurance that this, the goodness that comes out of something like this organisation is really there. And you can only do that when you sniff the air. The one challenge I have as the commissioner, of course, is I'm one person.
And appreciate that.
The government doesn't pay me full time; it only pays me a little for part time. So trying to juggle me being in all over the place and this at the same time doesn't make for a very entertaining time.
No.
But rest assured, though, the concept of being able to speak to people who have never been in the military and maybe don't understand the military and what it's about, and maybe have a fairly negative view about the military as a result of what's been in the media over the years, considerable concern to me. 2 generations ago, every single man will have had a military experience through either national service or serving in the wars. That's 2 generations ago. Now we can expect less than 10% to have had a first-hand experience of military experience. And that is really quite compelling as far as trying to understand or get that wider community to understand that being in the military is not bad, and being in the military generally is quite good. But clearly, being in the military is going to expose you to some challenges that not many other people will be exposed to. And as a result, therefore, there are some who will find that challenging. And so having organisations like the Men's Sheds to help people come back into their communities, because remember, that's where they came from, to bring them back in and recognise that they're actually normal, they're not ogres with 2 heads for some of the experiences that they might have had, that they're genuine people who need a bit of help. And once they get a bit of help, they can then really contribute to their community, is really important to me. Fantastic. Well, thank you. And I will say, by way of sort of finishing off, that thank you very much indeed for your support to those veterans who do come to your sheds. The fact that there is a facility for them to come to is fantastic. And what I really like about it is you treat them like normal human beings rather than eggheads who've been in the military. There's something like, it's horrible. And I really think that is tremendously important. It's about normalizing us. We are just human beings and we bring challenges, and you provide a facility that will let them address those challenges. So really, thank you very much indeed on behalf of the veterans.
Fantastic. There we are. Charlie Wallace. Let's see if he's on the call and we can get him into HQ's main room here. Very interesting conversation that. I think a massive group of people that are missing out in sheds that become shedders, and certainly, as we heard from that number of men, starting a younger demographic. There he is, the man himself, live in the flesh. How are you doing, Charlie?
I'm doing very well, thank you, Jason. I have to say that after watching back that video, I realised that what I was trying to say was not nearly as eloquent as Sir Harry Burns. I think his points were absolutely spot on, and he described them far better than I ever did. But I was trying to say roughly what Harry was saying.
Well, what can we say? Nobody can really match Sir Harry Burns, so don't beat yourself up, mate. Excellent. So thanks for making the time to be able to come on to us with us today live, and appreciate the time for that as we try and get more veterans aware of the sheds and get them into the sheds, as we've discussed. Benefits on both sides of it. We have had in the chat various comments coming through. I just want to see whether Stuart Patton would be willing to come on and have a chat with us. He's a veteran at the Gardner Valley Men's Shed. He put a quote in here basically saying the camaraderie aspect for him. I don't know if he's still on or if he'd like to speak about his experience from being that.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Oh, there you are,
can you hear
Stuart. Yeah, we can hear you, mate. So as we were speaking on there, like your comment, what can you speak to Charlie about your experience actually from being a vet and then, then finding the shed.
The thing about I wasn't in the forces for very long, but I was in long enough to get used to the camaraderie, and I was in an all-male regiment. I was in the parachute regiment. So when I came to the shed, immediately I felt like it was a bit like being around the guys in the military. It was a bit like being around those, the guys are more open when it comes to speaking about their issues and whatnot when you're with other guys. It's just a guy thing. I think with a woman, when she goes to the doctors or whatever, and she requests a female doctor, it's because she's more comfortable, with that, and speaking about her personal problems. The same with a guy. When you're in the shed, you're not necessarily conscious of the fact that you are talking to the guys in the way that you would. You can sit down, you can speak to psychiatrists, and you can do all of that kind of stuff, right? But the actual environment in the shed gives you something that you can't get anywhere else. You really can't get it anywhere else. I'm literally outside my shed right now. I've been in my shed all morning listening to you guys, and I can't tell you how much benefit I've had just from this Garnet Valley shed. I moved to Callander, which is about 60 or 70 miles away, and I travel here to come to the shed. That just shows you how much benefit I get from coming to the shed. And I've helped a couple of guys this morning, the one with a CCTV thing and that, and you can't replace that with anything, and the shed's value in the community is priceless, and the volunteers that come to the shed and take part in the shed, they are what make it successful, I think. That's me.
Thanks, Stuart. Fantastic, mate. And yeah, we can see the comms happening outside with the Garnet Valley logo just coming out of your left-hand ear, looking fantastic, all color-coded with the headphones on. Very cool, mate.
I wouldn't be able to hear you if I was in the shed with all the machines going and stuff, So
really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on, Stuart.
Thank you.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, anything to say on that, Charlie?
I'm speechless. I think he's rather wrapped it up pretty well. It is about camaraderie. It is about being able to talk to people who are in the same space as them, and gaining that confidence that's giving them a purpose, a sense of purpose that allows them to then find something to do to occupy them and give them that ability that Sir Harry Byrne was so eloquently pointing out.
Yeah, 100%. I see a hand up there as well, David Gardner. He'd like to come in.
Thanks, Jason. Right, just following on from Stuart. Stuart has been, without doubt, one of our success stories at the Garnet Valley Men Shed. To hear his story and to do so, what I'd like to do, Charlie, if you are ever in our area, please come along and visit us. I can arrange for Stuart to be there, and I'm quite sure you can have a personal conversation with him. To say he travels 60 miles, what he didn't tell you, he does it twice a week in actual fact. Contributes a lot to the shed, not only with his physical manpower, but his very fact he speaks to people. He explains his background, what he's come through, what the benefits are, and he fully understands the veterans' background. So, Charlie, I'd like to extend an invitation to you on behalf of my own chairman to Garnet Valley Men Shed. Jason will give you the contact details, and believe me, you'll be made most welcome. Okay, thanks, Jason.
Thanks.
Really kind of you. Thank you very much indeed for that offer, and I would very much like to take it up. So, Jason, if you are able to just pass those details on to us, and we can then see what we can do to arrange something. It probably won't be until the new year, but certainly there's something to look forward to for me. Thanks.
Fantastic. Yeah. Great. I mean, one of the issues, and we've spoken about this at length, even with the politicians, is they want to know how many veterans go to sheds. And there's that issue, of course, of do I actually want to say I was a veteran? I just want to be a regular bloke again. Very hard to actually sometimes find out who are veterans or ex-service personnel, even from the police, etc., in the sheds as they transverse from that world back into City Street. So it's great that we know about Stuart. It's fantastic that he is in a way also a younger man, because it is, as you said, these younger guys who are out there sometimes struggling, not getting back into the workplace exactly, or whatever, just to re-socialise back into Civvy Street. So there's your first invitation, Mr. Wallace. You're going to the West Coast? Right, we have if you just keep yourself unmuted, Charlie, if you want to just power in and out with comments or whatever, that'll probably be easier. I also want to invite on in the chat Professor Barry Golding, who is our next speaker afterwards. He obviously knows a lot about the veterans, etc., in Australia. So there he is. Barry, what you got to say to us, mate?
Look, I'm really enjoying both Harry and Charles. So thank you. I just thought you may already know that there's a number of veteran-specific sheds in Australia, particularly in Western Australia and South Australia, and two of these are actually case studies in my book. And I was aware when I was doing the indexing that there's so many mention of veterans in the 131 case studies in the book. I actually indexed all of the mention of veterans, so you can actually find them. And it really surprised me when I really looked. I mean, it goes right back to the very first shed in Australia that was created in 1998. It was actually funded by the Australian government, in part through the Department of Veterans Affairs. So there's been a long history of veterans involvement. In the early days, of course, it was Vietnam veterans here in Australia. But more recently, there's ex-servicemen from other walks of life. And there's a great case study in my book of these RAAF Air Force veterans in Kingsley in Perth, suburban Perth. They've been meeting in the same garage for over 20 years. It's actually a personal garage, and they do it on an afternoon when their wife goes out and plays golf. And then they back the cars out, and the double garage becomes a men's shed. And they've been doing this for 20 years, doing stuff for the community, fixing up bikes for refugees, and having one beer on the end of the session on one day a week. So there's some really great stories. And I just think, without telling you what to do, here in Australia, the Australian government actually funds sheds on a per serviceman basis. So if you've got 60 men in a shed and 6 of them are veterans, the shed is eligible for some funding to buy equipment. Not they won't pay for people, but they will pay for whatever, whether that's gym equipment or stuff. But if you look at what's done here in Australia, we don't have all the answers, but I think that's one way of doing it. And that sort of encourages veterans and also encourages men's sheds to identify veterans and to put their arms around them.
Thanks,
All
Barry.
right. No worries. I think I've said enough. I'll say more later. Thanks.
Yeah, great to have that focus of how those vets have integrated, and some of those early ones in Australia. We did have one in Edinburgh through the Thistle charity, which I believe didn't work too well and might have actually closed during the pandemic. Certainly something that we are very strongly looking at through our 5 development strategies. For those of you who have looked at those, we want to, in the next couple of years, definitely start working with Blue Light Services and veterans as part of our development strategies to get them to hear about sheds and build the movement with a different age demographic, really. I was quite shocked that that age group is so young, Charlie, leaving the forces. I always thought they'd probably be in their 30s, 40s or 50s if they were retiring. But, in their 20s, that's quite staggering. So the question I've got for you is, do we still have the guys that are in there that are, 30, 40 years of service and then retiring, or is that really not the norm anymore?
No, there are certainly plenty. You're talking to one. I did 35 years in the military. So there are plenty of people who serve a full career in the military, and they're coming out in their 40s, 50s. And of course, soon you'll be able to serve in the military right up until you're 60. And so that may well present a whole completely different set of problems of people who may be completely institutionalized after doing 30, 40 years in the military and not understanding what goes on outside. So that perhaps is something that is going to brew. But maybe, just maybe, the military is better in training these individuals and preparing them for the time when they finish their service by giving them qualifications that are recognized by people outside, especially private business outside, who are going to think about employing these individuals. But my concern, of course, is though about the general population's understanding of the military. Is something I alluded to a little bit in that in our conversation that we had earlier, and that is that as people's perceptions and understanding of military people, and what they may only ever understand is what they might see in the media, which could be potentially a little bit more negative than perhaps we would like. Or does it create an impression of, whoa, I don't want to go too near that veteran because they might bring problems to it, mental or physical. And if that is the case and we allow that to continue, then there is going to be a slight ostracization, perhaps, of those veterans who've served their time. And then they're going to feel isolated from that society. And are they then in a position whereby they're going to need some support? So there's two strands to this, I think. It's about educating our society writ large about the military and the benefits of being in the military and the skills that those individuals pick up when they're in the military. And it's about giving them opportunity when they come in so that they can exercise the talent that they've got. Now, if we succeed in all of that, of course, actually, then you don't necessarily need a men's shed to help somebody who is vulnerable. You've then got a men's shed who can help the local community. And maybe there's a different strands. Those two different strands can be, you can expand on those. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think this is definitely a place of development as we start getting into it. And I can tell you guys why I originally went down to Edinburgh to speak to Charlie, and I was grateful that he gave me his time. He's a busy man, years ago now. And that he's still here supporting and from that other level speaking, as many channels and directions as we can get men's sheds across to these different sectors, vitally important. So we've got the youngsters a few years, and then we've got the older guys coming in, and like Charlie himself, unless he's about to be put out to pasture in this role, not before that important document gets sent to them, Charlie. And then, of course, if you want to get hold of him, you're going to have to go to the forest, and he'll be a lumberjack in the making with his mates, cutting down trees or harvesting the forest in a good way. But hopefully you're going to get bored with that, Charlie, and you will get down into your local shed, particularly after you visited a couple. And we have had some other invitations coming up in the chat, so I will speak to these guys afterwards and feed them back to you as well.
That's one thing in the chat about, are there any military men's sheds?
Yeah.
I think the answer to that question is that there aren't specifically military men's sheds, but there are a couple of places. One of them is run by the Erskine Institution over at Bishopton, where they create that same facility that you might have, or same resources, I suppose, that you might find in a men's shed. And so they do run. And of course, we've got a lot of regimental associations dotted across Scotland through breakfast clubs and various other things where they gather together, but they mainly gather together just simply to talk. Whether there is an output that connects them with their local community is something which we end up finding we have quite a lot of discussions about, which I think actually tells me that better association with the Scottish Men's Sheds would be good, because it would help open their eyes actually to understanding how they can help the wider community and be part of it, and give them that sense of control and self-belief that's going to mean that they will add value to themselves as much as to the local community.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, good point. Thanks for bringing that up, Audra. Excellent. Right, I think we're coming to the end of the session. If there's any other questions, put your hands up, guys. Otherwise, we're going to move on.
Jason, I'd just like to say farewell and thank you very much indeed for giving me this opportunity. And I do look forward to visiting in due course. I'm afraid I've got to go now. Believe it or not, I have to go to HMS Belfast to to go and meet the White Ensign Association, who have a fairly similar organisations to some sheds dotted around about the country for naval personnel, and I'm trying to find out a wee bit more about them. But thank you, fantastic opportunity, and I wish you all the very best of luck as we come out of the pandemic. We try and get ourselves back to normal, and thank you for all your support to all the veterans. I know it means an awful lot to them.
Thanks so much, Charlie. Appreciate it. And back to you, mate. All the work you're doing in the great halls of Scottish Government, banging on the doors. We really appreciate your passion that helps these people's lives. So thank you so much, mate.
Okay, cheerio. Take care.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Cheers now.